you can sense that in the crowd when you're watching a newer comedian. You can almost hear like them dismiss the comic when the comic brings up 3 or 4 premises and gives them a mediocre punch on each one, and then moves on. And they're like, "Oh, okay, I see how this is going to go." Dang.
Greetings, everyone. Come on in and have a seat up front for the Funny Muscle Podcast. If you're here, then you're looking to learn how to create laughs like a pro. So please help me welcome to the stage your co-host to help you do that, economics professor and open micer Chris Stifler and comedian turned author Mike Lucas.
I was wondering if you wouldn't let me do a guest column on your Funny Muscle website.
Sure.
This is what I have. 10 things I've learned doing comedy my first year that I didn't know at the start.
Oh, good. I like that. So 10 things I've learned doing comedy in my first year that I didn't know at the start is a great listicle. I'd be happy to put that on the site, and I think we should go through them right now. So what's the first one?
The first one I talked about is there's a difference between a funny concept and a joke. And this is what I see a lot in stand-up open micers is they have like a funny concept, but they haven't taken the time to really massage it and move it into joke structure where the audience knows to follow along and then laugh. And they go on stage and get disheartened because they're not getting laughs. When really all they need to do is kind of like it's just underdeveloped. And so even like last week, I think you made that distinction, funny concept versus a joke, that really helped me in my head see that.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm watching my clients, and I'm watching you as you develop and begin to understand the craft. You can begin, and especially in the beginning, it's a little rusty or a little, like I should say, a little unwieldy. The way people try to heighten it, sometimes it's obvious, sometimes it's clunky, but at least it's an attempt. And I swear, every time even a new comedian attempts to heighten something, it gets laughs from the audience because the audience recognizes the gameplay. And they're not, it might not applaud and stand up and hoot and holler, but they laugh at the attempt at the gameplay. And when you don't do that, they're not laughing, and that's why they're waiting for you to attempt the gameplay, the misdirection, and then the satisfying that setup in a way we didn't expect.
So then, what's your advice though? Just put more time into it, or just don't get frustrated with the funny concept. Don't give up on the funny concept, but try to get it into joke structure, run it through the blueprint. Is that the
Yeah, that's the best way. Like if you understand what the humor blueprint is, the premise, setup, punchline, basic setup for a joke, if you can begin to at least understand how that works, then you can start to try to apply your ideas to that blueprint, and you can begin to, with your comedy lens, figure out a good way to set that up in a way that is sort of reflective of how the rest of your act goes, because your lens is sort of bleeds through all your jokes because that's sort of who you are. Like that's why I say record all your stuff, is because then you can watch and rewatch and go, okay, where did I fail? Where does that fail to hit that structure? What, like, okay, there's the premise. Okay, I got them thinking about what I want them to think about. Okay, there's my attempt at a setup, but it's not really misdirecting them into something different. Okay, now I need to do that better. Or okay, I set them up to be thinking about something really normal about this topic, and then I didn't give them anything abnormal. I didn't give them a twist afterward. I didn't really heighten it. I did one thing that I thought was funny, and it didn't get a laugh, and I moved on. Okay, how
moved
can I
on?
heighten
Yeah.
it better? What are some different ways to expand that so that it hits harder? And that's what a lot of new comedians I notice aren't doing, is they heighten, but not very well. I shouldn't say well, because it more like you have to heighten more. We want more of it.
Yeah, that's later on in my list of
Okay, we'll
10.
get to that.
But I think a good return on my investment of as I go through my material, I just ask, does this has myth that blah, blah, blah. Does this have misdirection? But like
The
for
one
my
thing I
example,
every time, every joke I go, we get some love, and that helps.
okay, give me okay. Does it have misdirection? But give you an
Thank you.
example of like it's a small version, but it got a couple laughs. Is my marijuana bit about jazz cabbage, and we can talk later about heightening that. But jazz cabbage was a funny concept. Like 70-year-olds call marijuana jazz cabbage was the funny concept, and I did it a couple times, didn't get laughs, and then I made it into. Of course, 70-year-olds don't use the politically correct term cannabis. They of course use the term jazz cabbage. And it has that
We
misdirection because you're
expect you to say
expecting.
marijuana or some other technical term, and now you've hit us with something. Yeah, that's very a funny specific. It sounds funny. It plays. It's fun on your ears. Jazz cabbage.
And so that got a laugh, but it was the same concept. It was just it needed some jigsawed into
Misdirection.
the.
Misdirection. That's what it was lacking. You were hitting them with the punchline without getting them to think of something different, and you just did a very slight change that gave them some misdirection that caused them to think, oh, he's going to say another word for cannabis, marijuana, or maybe one of the ones that they can think of. But jazz cabbage is funny because jazz is such an older person's love, yeah, I mean, obviously a lot of young people love jazz, but jazz is sort of like, that's my uncle likes jazz or my grandpa likes jazz. So jazz cabbage is it's just a fun, I don't know, it's just a funny phrase.
I know it's one of
You'll
those
be able to
like it's
explain
like
why.
Pop Tarts or like Seinfeld's Pop Tart or like
Yeah.
yeah, those funny terms. So I'd love to later on maybe because that's just one very low level joke and I don't heighten it, but that has to be into like the act out of like the jazz cabbage and like there's
Right.
got to be there needs to be.
I mean, I right away I can see it might be funny to watch grandma and grandpa when all the grandkids are asleep break out the jazz cabbage. That might be a funny act out. A cut to, and then we find out their opinion about jazz cabbage while they're doing it. There might be other ways to say it. An old person might like you might do 3 examples: jazz cabbage, or it could be preparation M, or whatever, or P,
Love that.
but something where you're combining old people terms with a young person's habit. So that might be there might be a bunch of different examples of that you could heighten. You could cut back to the first time that somebody decided to call it jazz cabbage to be sneaky, to be like it might maybe they worked at a farm. I don't know. But like there's a lot of ways you could, that's a word that's ripe for a callback.
That's what I was thinking too.
Really remember jazz cabbage, and if we get a decent laugh at it and the first time, it can be a funny callback, and you could use it for different things. You could jazz cabbage could be a new way to talk about sex or talk about like a sexual act. I grabbed her jazz cabbage. I don't think you understand that term.
That was one of the ones that did not make the top 10, but that I've learned is a callback's not going to get a laugh if the original joke that you're calling back to didn't get a laugh.
Yeah, and that's the mistake we make. We think this by simply bringing up something that it's going to get that laugh, but unfortunately, a lot of times they don't even remember what you're talking about because they're so invested in the present moment that they can't remember that was even a joke before or a reference before. So if it's not a big punchline, like jazz cabbage is memorable, and if it didn't get a laugh, they might be like not upset, but kind of like, why are you saying that again? We didn't like that the first time.
Perfect.
We thought we told you with our non-laughter that idea sucked. Why are you throwing it out again? Once again, no.
That's another one again didn't make the top 10, but the idea that it's helpful to address when you failed in a clever your clever persona way of doing it. And I think mine's going to be like like the professor. Shouldn't that have that punchline should that have got a laugh there? Is the premise supposed to be 45 seconds long without a laugh? Is that normal stand up?
Right. Yeah. And you'll figure out real fun ways to keep bringing that up, and it'll be a fun game that you play. And what it does is when you get good at it, it just allows you to be fearless because that even if this joke fails, I will get a laughter out of the failure. And that's
a safety net quote.
Yeah.
So that's let's see one. So one was concept versus joke, funny concept versus joke. Number 2 is just give yourself permission to write a bad first draft.
The first draft is it's going to suck. It's going to be weak. It's going to be weird. It's going to be, your attempt at doing something that's not done yet. So that always, for new people, that often, I should say, not always, nothing always does anything, but it often discourages new comedians because they're like, oh, this stuff sucks. This is what I wrote down about dogs and this sucks. It's just so typical or it's so obvious or whatever. But if you go back a day later and like undig the stuff you wrote about dogs, I promise you something in there will spark you and go, oh, I remember what that's this. And then you rewrite it and then it's a little bit better. And it still might suck, but it's a little bit better. And then you just keep crafting. And it's that idea of a first draft versus your final draft. There's so many in between there. And we don't get to see that. We don't get to watch Bill Burr or Wanda Sykes or Anthony Jeselnik. We don't get to watch them craft their first ideas into what we see on camera. What we see is their finished product. We see like a developed bit that's gorgeous, but it wasn't always like that, unless it was just like a riff that came out of them that was just perfect because they're organically funny anyways. But typically those are craftspeople. They're really honing that bit, and you have to be willing to go along with that process too. As a new comedian, you have to go, this is going to suck. It's okay. And that's what open mics are for. That's what workshops and classes are for, is to try that material out so that other people who aren't in your head can look at it and go, have you thought of this? Or have you thought of that? Oh, tag. Oh, possible new side route to that. Do you have any stories about this? Because that would fit in perfectly right here. Oh, that one bit you used to do that didn't work, that would fit in right here, blah, blah, blah. And so you begin to like rearrange all of those thoughts and ideas into the thing that can become the final product, which will get the big laughs, hopefully.
Yeah, I think that's exactly the wording of number 2 on my article here, is get the first draft down and chisel from there.
Yeah. Well, giving yourself permission to suck is very difficult. Like I can't remember who said this, but I think it was a writer, just a regular writer, not a comedy writer. But they were saying that if you are an artist, a creative, then you probably already have really good taste because you like really good things. And so when you create something yourself, it never measures up to the things that you love and watch and are entertained by, and so you have to trust that you will get it to that level eventually if you are willing to just put out a bad version of it at first, and eventually you will begin to have your final version meet the taste that you have acquired according to that, about that craft. Every batter in the MLB is like, do you know how many times I've struck out versus those home runs? But you have to take a big swing. It's a kind of hack, but it's you got to take a big swing if you want to knock it out of the park. And you got to at least get up to the plate and be willing to strike out. So talk about like having to be okay with sucking. Like those batters have to walk from striking out back to the dugout in front of all their friends, and then they've got to go back on the field and wait a bunch of more innings till they get another shot at it. And that whole time they could be stewing on how they just failed, but they have a short memory. They just have to block it out and go, next time I get up there, I'm going to kick it out of the park. If they kick it out of the park, that's a horrible baseball move. But definitely, yeah, the ump will throw you out of the game, probably. If you
kick it out into the goal from the...
Oh, yeah! Dude, what are you doing? I'm kicking it, following Mike Lucas' advice. But that's the idea, though. I like that. Give yourself permission to write a bad first draft, but you have to know that that's what that is. That's the problem, is so many people think that the first thing that comes out of you is the final draft because they're confused about the process. But the process includes redrafting over and over again.
Right. And let it spark new ideas, redo it in your head, let it incubate, sleep on it, redo it. That's like my process, which I had a decent first time, is because I vomited 1,500 words one night, but then it was the 15th edit that got down to 700 words that I actually went on stage with.
But like literally over half of the words you got rid of, and you probably still had like a third too many. You know what I mean? Because you didn't realize where what needs to be said and what doesn't need to be said for those things. And we all have that. We all can hone until there's not one fat word in that.
This is just one more technical, but I didn't know, is that you'll get the light at 4 minutes for a 5-minute set, right? Normally a minute to go. Or I actually didn't know how the open mics work a year ago. I went and scouted some out, and I learned, I saw the MC waving his phone in the air. I didn't realize what was going on. But then I realized that's, a signal that you have a minute left normally in a 5-minute set, and you should start wrapping it up. But you don't have to panic. But you should have like a bring it home kind of bit that allows you to kind of wrap up your set in a minute. I've also learned that it's a helpful technique to like acknowledge the light.
Yeah.
So the MC knows you see the light, you know how much time you have, because there's kind of bigger faux pas than I realized doing comedy is to do more time than you're supposed to.
Woo! It gets people really upset. It gets everyone else on the show upset. Well, he's taking my time. The
Yeah.
show's 90 minutes. So if you do an extra minute, that's one less that the headliner does. And they're paying the headliner big money to be there. Or they're paying, like in the case of an open mic, usually there's someone at the end that's they bring in to do the paid set. Or everyone else is like, hey man, we only got 5. Why does he get 6? Why does he get 7? It's real divisive when you do that. And typically you're not doing it to be a jerk. You typically just don't know how to handle that moment. Because even if every comic goes 20 seconds over, now that's an extra 10 minutes in the show or whatever that I didn't do. I was hoping to do the math on that, but 15 to 10 seconds divided by 60 times, let's see,
Jazz
metric.
cabbage.
See, now even that doesn't make sense, but it still gets a laugh because we're funny and we already got a laugh with it.
I noticed I was at Zany's last Monday for the first time in Chicago. You're stomping.
Oh, that was my home club. That's the club I got the Tonight Show out of. That was the club we auditioned. The former strip club.
But yeah, and it's really cool to see your face on the wall, signed, autographed, framed.
Right, yeah. You found it. That's cool. That's
right above Jay Leno.
Yeah, I'm glad they still have that. Yeah, me and Jay. Yeah, we pal around.
How does one? What hurdles do you need to do to get your portrait on a comedy club wall like that?
Anymore, I don't know. Like the way it used to work, because like a lot of these clubs are been around for a while and their walls are full.
Right.
So it's very different. Typically, in the old days, if you worked the club that week, you would sign your headshot that they used for promo, and then they would frame that and put it up on the wall. And you would be, depending on how famous you were, it would be depend on what section you were on the wall. So
that's why yours was in the bathroom.
Yeah, typically they want people to see me while they're shitting, and then they go, it's kind of a punishment for dropping a deuce at a club. Stare at this guy for a while. How do you like that?
Did you do 2 minutes on shit shoes? Because that was a pretty good bit you kind of riffed last time we talked.
I could do 2 minutes on anything. I could. I mean, that's the thing about like when you have improv training, you can really kind of do time on anything. The problem with that is it's not guaranteed that you'll get laughs per minute. You can begin to develop.
Yeah.
Now, how do you turn shit shoes as a concept? And for those
joke structure. Yeah.
We were talking before about, I'm a comedian, and in the one club that I worked at, I'm a comedian who has a nervous stomach, and every time I would do a show right beforehand, I would have to take a dump, and it was just a natural thing that it had. And it's fine if the green room has a bathroom, but some clubs don't have a green room with a bathroom, so you're forced to take your dump in the same place that your audience is in. So like that's the premise. Like that's sort of like that's kind of a wordy premise, but so that's the first part I work on was how do I set that up, and then you would have to misdirect, so you'd have to say something like so of course since that's true, I would never ever in that case shit in my normal shoes. I would always bring an extra pair of shit shoes with me, because now instead of I would never do that, but with my same shoes. So you'd work on that misdirection a little bit. You'd get them to really think that you like oh my god, that totally takes it off the table. No, it doesn't. I just have to do special preparation for it. And now you've got the idea of
you're re-engineering the joke structure, because the funny part of last comic was your act out. You said shit shoes. You have a bowling bag with your shit shoes, right, and a third of a pair of pants you staple to yourself to.
Right. So now that
was funny.
Yeah, you're trying to get joke structure to set that moment up, and so now it makes sense for me to do that act out. With does he bowl right after this? No, he's off going to take a shit. His shit shoes are in there, and I think his pants quarters. Yeah, he has a quarter length of pants that he staples to his regular. And they complement his shit shoes. The problem is if his shit shoes don't match his quarter pants, so he's got 3 or 4 versions of each, kind of thing. You can just begin like, and then you just start to have fun with it. And then once you get them on board, the idea of it, then you can just riff, and then what you end up doing when you're a comedian, like how I develop material is I'll do that bit on stage on like an open mic, or like if I'm doing a pro show, I'll do that in the middle somewhere, and I'll have recorded it, and then I'll just work on it when I'm not on stage, and then I'll bring it back and I'll figure out when does that bit work in the course of my act, if it's worth doing, if it's a big enough laugh.
But that referred us back to like my number 2 on the list is give yourself permission to
Yeah.
write a first draft. Yeah.
Yeah, and it just depends on what, like if you're about to do your special, you might not want to be workshopping bits. If you're about to do your first headlining gig in front of a new club, you might not want to be workshopping bits, but if you're a regular somewhere and you've got half hour, the club wants you to do 5 minutes of new stuff at least, because then that shows that gives their audience new stuff. If they've already seen you before, it's like watching a band doing their new music. You want that, but you want their hits too. But yeah, doing your time is such a key point in doing comedy. It's a little bit less when you're a headliner and you're the main act. That's probably the only time you have any kind of permission to go over. But even still, the staff needs to know how much time you're doing, because they're timing the show around that. When do we drop the checks? When are people paid? Once people are paid, the club's not making money anymore. Well, I mean, once they pay their bills, the club's not making money anymore. So if you do another half hour,
right,
that's a miscommunication, where if you would have told the club that you wanted to do that extra time, then they can sell drinks during that time and make more money for the wait staff and for the club owner. So it's a real important thing to really hammer down in the beginning, because it really can backfire on you. You could literally lose work because you went over.
That's number 3 on the list. The other next 2 are similar, but I broke them out into 2 different bullet points. The one I learned is don't step on your laughs. When you start looking at this, it's like so obvious, and a small tweak can make the big difference. But a lot of times you'll see open micers have a decent joke, but they'll have a bunch of extra syllables after the keyword and the punchline. And so, like, an example I thought of was like the guy was doing a bit about hanging out with very wealthy clients in a ski town, but he's used to drinking beer at a trailer park. And trailer park is the keyword and the punchline. But when he did the joke, he said, I'm used to drinking beer at the trailer park with my friends. And he continued to, and so the audience half laughed.
Yeah.
But then it got stepped on because he was continuing to talk. And that's such an easy switch, just rearrange that sentence to say, I'm used to drinking beer with my friends at the trailer park.
Yeah, as you get more experience as a comedian, as a writer, you'll recognize those words, like trailer park's the word, that's the punchline word, and then you'll quickly know if you're right or wrong after you try that bit once, and you'll go, oh my God, no way, the actual laugh is at the Bud Light, that's the laugh, but it happens all the time. Every one of my clients that I work with and I watch their videos, that's always one of the notes. Like, you stepped on your laugh right here. Like, did you see how they wanted to start laughing? That one lady started laughing and she was going to lead the whole pack. And then you started second guessing it and talking about something different, or started re-explaining it, or you said some extra words that weren't necessary, but you were nervous, so you didn't know better, and all that stuff. And it just happens all the time. It happens for, pro comics. Like, you get up there and you haven't worked out a bit yet, and you realize, oh, I stepped on my own laugh. But it's very quickly tweaked by a pro, and it's a lot slower sometimes for a newer comedian, because they don't realize that that's what happened. I think that part of that note has a lot to do with your listening skills. And when you're a comedian, you have to be a really good listener. You have to listen on so many different levels. You have to listen to how it's coming out of your mouth. You have to listen to how it's coming out of the sound system, what they're hearing. You have to listen to their laughs and their rhythm. You have to listen to when they're not laughing. And you have to decide whether that's because they don't like it or because they're waiting. So, not to mention all the ways you have to listen off stage. When you're listening to the world as a comedian, you're listening for so many different things. You're listening for the struggles. You're listening for the funny words. You're listening for the funny phrases. You're listening for not just what someone says, but how they said it, why they said it, why you think they said it versus why they probably said it. You're listening for like that's the thing about comedians, is you have to become a really incredibly good listener. And that's what I would with when you take an improv class, it forces you to listen and shut the F up, because we are always trying to one up people with our jokes. But when you really listen to someone and then you begin to yes and heighten what they said, it's a way better laugh and a way better pathway to more jokes.
Let me workshop an example because I have that one bit that says, like Colorado last year collected 424 million in cannabis, jazz cabbage revenue. And I make a joke that says, I know there's no stoners at Department of Revenue because if there were, once they hit 420 million, like on December 27th, they would have shut off the taxes. But when I say December 27th, like the idea that you can just shut off taxes like on a December 27th is kind of the funny concept. But I realize when I say December 27th, some of them start to laugh, but I don't know where to finish that or where's the punchline or the key word in the punchline.
Well, the funny idea in that joke is 420. So that's the first laugh probably that you're going to try to shoot for. So you know that whoever is in charge of that isn't a stoner, because they would have shut it right off. That it would have stopped at 420. December 15th, they would have been like, hold up, no more, man, no more.
Yeah,
If we stop right now, it'll be so cool. Oh my God, this is it. We should never collect more than 420 million, man. That's our agreement with the universe or whatever.
But I see the parallel with that in your shit shoes. Like it's the act out part that we have already that gets the laugh.
Yeah, we're trying to get to that act out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the challenge of act outs, is you really need to tell a joke first, because otherwise you're doing sitcom stuff, or you're doing not even that, you're doing like performance art than stand up. So stand up is, you have to be able to do a premise, setup, punchline, and then from that you can act out to heighten that. But you can't just simply act out everything. I learned, because that was the mistake I was making early on, was I was not realizing that there needed to be some technique in front of my act outs. I was just up there being crazy and people were laughing, so I figured I was doing the job. But if you're going to be a real stand-up, you need to have jokes in there. You need to have those premise setups and punchlines, those misdirections. And that's the craft that other comedians and true fans of comedy will recognize and appreciate.
But on the same lines of like, don't step on your laugh, I said, tiny tweaks can make or break a bit.
Yeah.
And we've come up with a lot of examples just working with you the last several months of just extra 2 syllables, extra 2 words that switches the whole joke. And so the one example I thought was the bit I do about like how gazelles signal to lions. And I liken that to how women signal in bars that like, don't approach me, I'm too fast, too attractive. But I used to do that bit, and I said, women do this at bars, and it didn't get a laugh. And I tweaked it to say, women do this to me at bars.
Totally.
And the addition of to me made all the difference. 2 syllables.
Right. And if you think about it from a woman's point of view, the first one, you're saying to them, I know you women and you all do this. The other one is saying, I'm a loser and you do this to me and I don't like it.
Exactly.
Totally different jokes. Totally different butts of that joke.
Right. So it was 2 syllables, which is amazing to me. Yeah. From like completely like binaries, not failing versus getting a laugh. And it was just a tiny tweak. So I guess
there's a pause will do that too sometimes. Like you can't believe that if you add a pause, then the joke it lands. And if you forget the pause, it doesn't get that.
I gotta, when I do that bit about, everyone sends happy birthday texts from the toilet. A third of people wish happy birthday from the toilet. And then I say something about like, think about that when your mom sends you 3 text messages. But if I don't pause, it's a little bit cerebral. So it takes a second to get what I'm saying is your mom's shitting while she's sending you text messages.
And that pause gives them that chance to do that. And that's only as somebody who's done this joke a few times and over that knows to add that pause. But that's the stuff why you record and why you listen and why you become a good listener, is because you go, oh. And then you also have to almost be a little bit of a psychoanalyzer. Like you have to go, what were they thinking from what I said that was different than what I wanted them to think? Like what did I trigger with those using those particular words that I didn't want to trigger that made them think in a different way? And then you have to start to really like outguess them that way. and sometimes people will tell you, so you listen. Like that's why sometimes when people will give you feedback about jokes or feedback about your act, like don't listen to any of it, but listen to all of it, because some of it might be true and some of it might be helpful. And as long as you don't have an ego about like, I know what I'm doing, fuck you, don't tell me what I'm doing, then listen, because sometimes it might be like, oh, I heard when you said that, I heard this and I didn't hear that. Oh, okay, because the way I say this word comes out weird for some people in this region or whatever.
Mhm.
It's like a little tiny things, and it makes
Yeah.
all the difference.
Like other things aren't like that. It's not like I didn't take an extra screw on my dresser I made, and it's not a dresser. Like it's still a dresser. It just doesn't
For
just
one piece of clothing, and then I put the screw in, and everything fits. Yeah, it's so wild how. But you always hear like the really great comics, talk about there's not one piece of fat on that joke. There's not one extra word on that joke in that joke. And for that matter, there you can tell when there's one too few words in that joke because it no longer works.
yeah, or and it loses some rhythm to it. That's
Yeah.
another one I didn't make a top 10 is, but like the mirror rhythm of like the joke structure I do like, my buddy Salt Lake looks at the airport and says, I need to lose 15 pounds. He lands in Denver and says, I need to lose 20 pounds. And then he lands in Detroit and says, I need to find a modeling agency because I'm gorgeous. But the
Right.
original version that I did for you, I didn't mirror the I need,
Gotta be
and
in there.
not quite just that little extra tweak again
Yep.
makes that
Well,
joke makes
well,
that bit a lot better.
that those contrasts, the part of getting a laugh with the contrast is a repetition of that part of it, that rhythmic part of it. And that I bet you that, our friend Adam Bloom would probably have a lot to say about that. We could talk to him when we have him.
2 weeks, yeah, yeah. So if you have a chance to get his
Yeah,
Amazon
now's
one.
the time to grab it. Yeah, that's a good tease in that we're going to have him on the show in 2 weeks to interview our first guest. Maybe, I don't know, unless we have one before him. But
Yeah. Mhm.
okay, so that's the first five things that you didn't know when you started comedy a year ago. What's the rest of the list? What's number six?
Number 6 I have is heighten your bits. This is something you've been preaching to me the last several months we've been working with is just, you know, you have an idea and you've spent 45 seconds getting the premise and the setup of your audience and they're with you and you give them a tiny little joke and then move on and spend the next 45 seconds starting another premise where you keep telling me like, stop, heighten that bit. That's 3 minutes of material. Your one mediocre punchline. You took me 45 seconds to get Walter White from Breaking Bad into the Civil War, and you gave me one tiny Civil War joke, and then you jumped to
Right, like the
baseball.
game's afoot. I want to hear more Breaking Bad meets the Civil War. Like, what do you got for me? And then, yeah. And it's funny because heightening is in that way where you're tagging it and increasing your tags, but also there's a way to heighten your material where your choice is more ridiculous. So instead of taking option 1 through 12, as I say you need, comedians need to take option 13 and on, because those don't normally occur to most people. And when you heighten an idea, it has to be way beyond that scope of what most people are going to be thinking about, because if it's not surprising to them, or it's something they've heard before. So that's where you can also, where more heightening can serve you.
And that's what something I kind of sorely lack as a new comedian. I can't really say I really have a bit that's like really heightened and crushes. I have like mediocre laughs, but that's what I'm working on.
Yeah, I was always a heightening whore. I was someone who, I was like, oh, you like that? I'm going to milk this comedy teat until there's not another drop of funny in there, and then I would back it off when I would do it again, and because I knew where the edge was. But I would never let them go with, like almost to not a fault, but to where the crowd might be tempted to go, like with Jim Gaffigan, like, no more bacon bits. Surely you can't have any more bits about bacon. Well, actually, I do. And then he does another 5 minutes on it, because he's heightening the idea of, how tasty is bacon, or, how much do I love bacon? I love it so much that, and then he's answering that question with his heightens. And the great thing about those really, professional and funny comedians is they heighten to a place that doesn't occur to us, and and mostly because they've set us up with a misdirection to make us think of in a way that way that they're going to heighten would never occur to us, because they're misdirecting us towards a really basic place.
My advice would be like, don't settle for the same way you said, don't settle for the first 12. Don't settle for the mediocre one laugh, because we've invested so much time getting us to the frog bank. Frog bank 4 or 5 more. We want to see your comedy lens.
Yeah, do some combining of worlds. Like, show us what you got. Show us, and that's where that's where your heightening devices come in, because now you can say the same thing, but this time with a contrast. Well, they do it like this here and they do it like that there. Oh, okay, that's, and then you could do a cut forward to a cut back to. There's all sorts of ways you can begin to investigate that idea that you just created, that frog bank that you just created. And when you don't do it, I think it's real dissatisfying to the crowd, because that's what they came to show up for. They're like, I want to watch the playfulness of your games.
It dissatisfies is a good way of saying it. It's like we trusted you to get us into this premise.
Yeah, and that you can sense that when the crowd, when you're watching a newer comedian, you can almost hear like them dismiss the comic when the comic brings up 3 or 4 premises and gives them a mediocre punch on each one, and then moves on. And they're like, oh, okay, I see how this is going to go. Dang, this isn't going to be that great. Whereas you can get one comedian who goes up there and talks about his breakup, and then all of a sudden, he's heightening the breakup to a level where, oh my God, now whenever I break up, this is all I'm going to think about.
Yeah. So like your first kiss bit that just like heightened into the chicken.
Yeah. Right. And then and to him, to where he's shouting, this is what I would have done to your face, like, yeah. And then he's driving home afterwards, even, and I think I'm going to call her again. I think she really liked me. And then at the very end of that bit, he's like, he just does a final, I think he's looking in the rearview mirror. He's like, or whatever.
But that goes into my number 7 on the list is you didn't actually squawk like a chicken, but you had a clever way of getting into that bit without lying to the audience. Like, I think the first time I started writing jokes, I was like, well, I have this really good idea about what if I had a threesome on a plane or whatever. But no one's going to believe that I actually did that on a flight from Pittsburgh to Denver or whatever. But all I do is tweak it and say, well, what if, or imagine if, or can you picture?
Now, it's funny to think about the adventurous professor is having a threesome on a plane. What would that be like? And then you could fantasize with it. And then that allows you to heighten it into a ridiculous place, because you've never said this really happened.
But as we developed that in an earlier episode, we did that, we threw the heightening devices at my plain PDA bit. But my original write of that was, I am part of the threesome, but it doesn't work because it's obviously a lie.
And the thing is like, you're an okay looking guy. Like, no one's going to doubt that you had a threesome, but in that story isn't about you having a threesome. Now, if you had a threesome on a plane, like, you would tell that story differently. Like, that would be a different tale that you're telling. I've got something really racy happened to me on a plane. I got to tell you about this because this was not, and then that's a different story, because now you're setting it up as a realistic, like, this really happened to me. But if it didn't, man, it's so easy to tell when someone's bullshitting.
Yeah,
really for the sake of a joke.
Correct. And then they lose your trust. And then, or even if you're thinking, I don't really believe them, they're using mental energy that's not dedicated to laughing. And then the bit won't work.
Yeah. And why do you need to be in that threesome? Like, why can't it be, like, if it didn't really happen, why can't it be a hypothetical what if? That, like, to me, like, unless you need the crowd to think that you're sexual, but most comedians don't need that.
As a new comic, I didn't even think you could, like, it just opened the door to, like, yeah, you can do a talking hypothetical. You have a bit, just say what if, like, or that's even a writing, one of my heightening, like, writing devices is I just say what if, and then I just start free writing.
What if is a great exercise, because it just allows anything to happen. What if coyotes were involved? What if the plane wrecked and we had to now be on an island together, awkwardly, post coitus?
So right? What if, or can you imagine if, or can you picture?
It's fun. And then again, though, those are the things you have to heighten. Like, heighten them so that they're ridiculous. But then that shows you all the different possibilities. because I mean, and let's be honest, like here's like all of your jokes are kind of a lie. Like the heightens that you do, like, you know, my bed never tried to really actually seduce me. You know what I mean? My bed wasn't talking to me, but the idea was it felt like that. So that's how I get into that one. It felt like my bed was trying to seduce me back into it. So now I can do that whole bit about my bed having a for Michael, you know, oh, you look good this morning. You know, we all know that didn't happen, but we know that that's what it felt like to me. So, oh, he must have been really tired. He must have been really lazy. Oh, that bed must be really comfortable. And then we go along with it because he never said, yeah, my bed is actually a talking bed. It's incredible. Right. In the morning when I wake up, it says these things to me. Well, no, it didn't. You know, unless he's just that guy, you know, and that's one of the things that if I was to go back on stage now and begin a new attempt at a comedy career, I would add more of that realism to all of my stuff, knowing that that's a better choice. I think in a lot of cases, I might not have even made it clear that these things didn't actually, you know, my alarm clock isn't really a dick, just so you know. It's just an alarm clock I bought at the store. However, it feels like he's a dick. You know, like there might be better ways to do that so that my stuff is more, me as a person and as a storyteller is more believable. All right, so number 8 in the list of things that you learned now that you didn't know a year ago before you started comedy.
I said you don't need to do a new 5 every time.
I made that mistake when I first started. I didn't know that was true. I thought that every time you went on stage, you do a new act. When I was first starting, it didn't occur to me that you could repeat what you said. Like, why would you do that? It'd be like going to another party and repeating the same conversation that you had. And
right, it's a good metaphor.
I'm going to get called out. They're going to know I've already done this before. So, but that's and that's such an embarrassing thing to admit because it seems so obvious, especially now in 2024 that we've known comedy for so long. And we've seen a comedian over and over again, and we get that they repeat their. But at the time, I was like, I didn't know that, and it was such a relief. I was like, oh, you mean I could do it again and actually try to do it better?
Right.
All right.
The other one, let's see, number 9 on the list was just a demarcation in my head of joke structure, premise, setup, punchline, and act out. If you don't really have that demarcation, it's just hard to write comedy when because again, you go from joke concept to act out. And then you never really have the but. So even just knowing the difference between those kind of the structure of a joke. Of course, I've heard the term setup punchline, but to really say I understood and could demarcate and think of jokes in that kind of like, you know, here's your wing, here's your fuselage, here's your whatever bathroom you're making out in threesome in, without having this clear.
Yeah.
Maybe that's different for other people because I'm a very, systematic, economic kind of brain, but having those clear demarcations was helpful.
It really is, and as you get better and better at it, obviously your skills develop, and now we don't see our demarcation. All right, what's the last one? Number 10. The number 10 thing that you learned that you didn't know a year ago before you started doing comedy
is email a fledgling shitty writer and ask to join a podcast with them. And then get free comedy advice from them on Thursdays.
That would never work. Who would fall for that? Not only an idiot, only a desperate idiot who needed someone to like them would do that. Wait a minute. That sounds like a familiar guy.
No, I said work with a comic teammate.
Yeah.
You know, you're never going to get the tags or see that. We talked about this earlier as we started talking today. You're never going to see the tags. You're never going to see. But you're able to heighten and bounce back, ball back and forth. It's going to get better and better and better. How do you work with a teammate? How do you not be selfish? How do you not someone just sucking all the air out of the room, but take turns? Sure. Let me run a premise by you for 10 minutes. Let's try to tag it or develop it, and then I'll let you the opportunity to run your material. How do you develop a trusted comic writing group? I guess.
So many friendships have been lost over 2 people writing a joke together and both of them wanting it at the end.
Oh yeah, I was curious how you.
That was my punchline. Yeah, but that whole joke was there because I set it up and we were trying to figure out my punchline. And so you have to first of all, you have to work with somebody you really trust and somebody who is not that person. That's going to try to take what's not theirs, and you'll find out pretty quickly. And if you have a good comedy lens, a real clear comedy lens, then no one can take your stuff anyways, because it's the way you're approaching the subject of dogs is going to be different than how I approach the subject of dogs. So you might be able to imitate a joke I do because it's funny, but it won't make sense that you're doing it, and it'll stand out from all the other stuff that you're doing. And so that's one thing. But in terms of like finding someone that you have a good rapport with is tough, because you have to have sort of the same level of sense of humor. But like I know I just saw an interview with Jerry Seinfeld and Larry David, and they said like one of the first things when they met each other, they both realized how much the very little things annoyed them. The smallest things became big things to both of them, and so that was where their connection point. And they ended up doing a lot of work together because of that. Obviously, have you heard of the show? There's a show actually named after Jerry Seinfeld called Jerry Seinfeld Show. Mike, I think it's just called Seinfeld. Let's agree to disagree. Let's agree to disagree. And there's a lot of people that will not do well with you. They will not work well with you, and you have to be able to recognize that pretty quickly. And I think you do. I think anyone who's funny, like you've taken an elevator ride, and then the person next to you, you throw a bit out, and then they don't say anything. It's so very quickly you're like, oh boy. And then there's someone else, like it could be like a little old lady, and you'll be like, the elevator will make a noise, and you go, oh, that wasn't me. And the old lady will be like, I know it was me, or something, and she'll
Plays
joke
on.
around. And now all of a sudden you and this old lady are making fart jokes in the elevator and having a laugh, and you're like, oh, okay, that like we have a similar sort of way we think about stuff. And you find that with comedians even more. But comedians are notoriously like solo. So you got to be really careful about respecting that. Comedians are like a lot of them are, they're social, and then they need a lot of private time to recover. A lot of comedians don't want to be bothered off stage by anyone who's not in their close realm, and so you have to be really respectful about what people like and what people want and what people prefer. But when you find that one person, I mean, like look at even with you and I, we've been able to workshop a lot of these bits and come up with some stuff, and I've watched you do it on stage, and it's getting laughs. And so I think it's for the better that you have someone to bounce that stuff off of.
Yeah.
My friend Kev Rogers and he used to be a comedian, and now he's sort of a business owner, a copy chief and copywriter. And Kevin and I wrote a sitcom script together. It's like a couple decades ago, back when I had a representation in Los Angeles. CAA is a big.
You were a sitcom like Seinfeld, like type like.
Yeah, so we were like, this guy he's Frank Caliendo's agent. So Frank hooked me up with him. And so I was like there, I wanted to prove to him that, we could write a sitcom and he would represent us and whatever. So Kevin and I, were online writing back and forth, and it was fantastic because I'd never written anything with somebody. And so I would do my best to come up with the jokes and whatever I had, the scenes and ideas or whatever. And then I was done. I was exhausted. I had nothing left. I got, so then I just hand it to him and go, now you hold this piece of crap and do what you can to improve it. And then he would go through and he would see things that I couldn't see. He would punch lines that I didn't even know were a setup, and then all of a sudden I get it back, and it's like it's surprising. You're like, oh, this is funny. Oh, and then it occurs to you, oh wait, now I could tag that with blah blah. And so back and forth you build,
or even rewrite, share a Google Doc. But how would you model? Okay, let's do a writing group. We're gonna have coffee on Sunday afternoons. We have an hour together. What's your tactics, techniques, or how would you set up, a trusting environment to work with a comedy writing partner?
Like if you and I were going to like sit down live and do it, like when we were both comedians trying to make it, then first thing you would do is say, okay, whatever time we have, divide it by 2. So and then we flip a coin to see who goes first, and then from that point on, the next person goes first the next time, and you just remember, whatever. So that might be, if you're both really anal about all that shit, that's one way to do that. And then what you do is, if you're both hungry writers, you both have a big page of ideas that you want to try out on the other person. So you go, okay, for the first 30 minutes, I'm going to throw out my premises, I'm going to throw out my ideas, and then you tag them, help me tag them. and then the second 30 minutes you throw out your premises and ideas and I'll help you tag them. And then
What's a tag, Mike? Just to stop you.
Oh, a tag is like an additional joke, additional punchline on top of a punchline you've already done. So it would be like what you were calling a heightened before would be like you're doing more tags. Like so like my bit about the first kiss, and a tag would be now I'm not I'm moving my head like a chicken. So that's an additional funny part about me doing. So that would be a tag to that joke, and then is a tag because I'm adding more and more. So a tag is just like I'll help you with an additional punchline to something that you're already doing.
I saw you tagged that bit when you did the shit shoes because you had the shit shoes and the bowling idea, but then when you redid it later in the podcast, you added the I got a third of a pair of pants that I staple on, and then you tagged it further. A whole different guy in there, a whole different guy in there.
Right. So those are all tags, and those are tags to that bit, and then you could take that bit in a whole new direction, and you go now I have to bring shit shoes with me on a date because those dates make me equally nervous. Are we going bowling? No. Nope. That's for
To
something.
that Italian restaurant reservation.
Well, I'll tell you about that later when we're married. But for right now, will you excuse me? I need to use the restroom. Yeah, I wasn't that guy in the restroom exactly. Yeah, whatever. But you know what I mean. So now you would be tagging a new bunch of jokes. So that's what a tag would be. But so that would be like for the two of us, to two people to work together. That'd be one way to do it. Another way to do it would be to go back and forth. Like I'll do an idea, then you do an idea, and then I'll keep whatever we come up with afterwards, and you keep whatever we come up with for you. And then you have to just trust each other to not steal the other guy's jokes, and that just is about friendship. That's just about being honest and not being a thief. And it's tough because sometimes you'll come up with a really good line for somebody and you're like, oh man, that would work really well for me. Damn it. And sometimes if that's true, then you can work out a deal and you go, I'll pay you for that bit. Can I give you $50 and then let me, now that bit's mine, or whatever the going rate is nowadays. It's probably like $1,000. In my day, it was $50 for a joke and you didn't mind it because, you didn't
and
eat
jazz cabbage.
But you couldn't buy jazz cabbage for a week, but you didn't mind because you had a solid bit on grocery shopping. That's whatever. Sorry. I needed some tags on that one. But yeah, so yeah, and like I said, a lot of comedians work by themselves, and that's great. A lot of ways to meet a good writing partner is when you go to open mics. You begin to meet the other people. You watch them on stage. Like my friend Tom Brogan and I worked together quite a bit and wrote a lot of material when we were down in Orlando together and in Chicago. And it started out where we were doing open mics and we would watch each other, and he would crack me up and his stuff, but it was so different than what I would do. And I would crack him up with what I was doing because it didn't occur to him to do any of the things that I would do. And I think I told you the story where we exchanged our sets one night. And I knew his 5 minutes so well. I said, why don't I do your 5 the way I would do it, and you do my 5 the way you would do it, and we'll see how it goes. So I went up first in the open mic, and I did his material, and I acted out everything that he did. So he had all these really well-written jokes about being a Vietnam veteran. I was probably at the time 24, 25, so there's no way I could have been a Vietnam veteran. This was in the 90s, so it would be like, dude, were you even born when I was 5 when this war started, But people still laughed and believed and laughed at the jokes because they were just well-written jokes, and I was telling them and I was selling them way beyond what he would ever have done. So after that, I felt really good about myself, and I was like, see, I'm a great comic. I can make anything come alive. Cut to Tom doing my material. And it was awful. He had the worst set he's ever had because I had no jokes written, and he was a joke teller, and he didn't know how. So he was trying to do my act outs without any of my premises and setups. I mean, without any of my setups and punchlines orchestrated. So then he was trying to do I'm the single guy doing a cooking show in my kitchen, and I'm using the sink as my blender, and and it just was like, what are you talking about? I got my head cut off, or the guy got his head cut off on Space Mountain, and he's no longer got a head. Woo, And it was just like, oh, you're gross. Why are you doing that? And so he bombed, and it made very clearly I was like, he's a great joke writer and not as good of a joke delivery person, and I'm a great joke deliverer, and I'm a terrible joke writer. And so both from that exercise learned what we had to work on in each of our each of our acts. I had to become a better joke writer, and he had to become a better deliverer, and we both did based on that exercise. So it was actually very valuable and cool, but it was so it was so disheartening to realize that you suck at writing jokes, and whereas a really good joke writer, you can, like, I could do one of Seinfeld's bits and you'll laugh because it's such a well-written joke. It doesn't matter that it's him or me telling it. It's just that good of a joke. Now, of course, when he tells it, it's funnier because it's his joke and he's better at it. But the point being, he's a great joke writer, and a well-written joke can be delivered by anybody.
It's kind of the origin of why you went back and had to reteach yourself premise, setup, punchline, and then get into your act out.
I really did, and I'm not saying I ever, got perfect at it, but I was way better at it after that. I really began to work on the craft of it and go, oh, okay. But even still, though, like I said, if I went back now, there's things I would do differently now than I did back then because I understand it better. I have a more appreciation of the craft as opposed to thinking I'm just damn funny, deal with it.
Okay, Mike, let's demonstrate how a comedy partner works. I just have a list of premises I wrote this week.
Okay,
so they're just concepts, but I don't have really anything. But I'm getting better at like seeing premises in the real world and jotting them down throughout my day. But like, Edmund Hillary. You know who Edmund Hillary was?
The mountain climber.
Yeah, first to climb Everest. And they ask him like, why are you doing it, or something like that, and he says because it's there. I'm trying to frog bank that. Like, if he says because it's there, what does he do in other situations? Or like,
it's what I'd want to know. What does he not do? Because everything's there. So I was put him in a bunch of situations. Why don't you stand in that longer line at Walmart? Why? Because it's there, Edmund. Because it's there.
Well, I was wondering if you do, or does his wife turn it around on him? What? Yeah. Take out the trash, Edmund. Take out the trash.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
It's there.
Why? Because it's there. Stop holding that against me. That might be funny. Like, boy, that's a tough quote because everyone can hold that against you. That's a real easy quote.
That's the premise then.
His boss, and then you'd have to figure out more and more clever ways of,
But if you just rearrange that for the premise, that's a tough quote because everyone can hold that against you. Is that setup or premise or?
Yeah, that's a tough quote. Is the setup, and then because everyone can hold that against you is the start of the punchline. And then you'd have to give examples,
But you've just taken what was a funny concept to me and now have at least started to put it into joke structure.
Yeah. And then now we begin to be heightened, like how open-ended is because it's there,
Okay, so this is the problem I struggle with, is asking what am I heightening? How open?
No, what are you heightening? You're heightening the idea of the quote because it's there. Like how open-ended is that? Like how easy is that to use against me? It's so easy that my wife would use it. It's so easy my boss would use it. My kids would use it. My dog uses it. When I go to buy a car, I don't want the Cadillac. Why would I buy the Cadillac? Because it's there, Edmund. I heard that's the only reason why you do things. And then people are dicks about it. Like, it'd be funny to be dicks to Edmund Hillary.
Or you can't. It's like I'm thinking of like a liar, where we know Jim Carrey can't lie, so they're throwing him in situations to their advantage.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you can get him to do a bunch of stuff like his kids. We want candy, but we're not. But it's there. Yeah. You have to just like experiment with that, and yeah, like the idea of like maybe apply it to your life, like the adventurous economist. Why would that work for you or not work for you? Like, why do you do things because they're there? Why do you climb hills? Why do you hike?
Yeah, okay, that's my list. You can find it on funnymuscle.com.